The Thimbles. Half a liter, 8 cylinders, 8 carburettors, 78 horsepower at 12,000 RPM in 1955. Do that arithmetic. 499 cc, split 8 ways, 62 cc per cylinder on a 44mm bore. This is the Moto Guzzi Auto Cylindri, designed by Giulio Carcano for Grand Prix racing. And the arithmetic is also the price. 62cc does very little work per bang, so the only place left to find power is repetition, which is why it makes almost nothing down low and has to reach 12,000 RPM before it's really doing anything. In 1955, that was a severe ask of the metal available. It did it anyway. 171 miles an hour on period tires and brakes. The engine was so far ahead of everything holding it up that the rest of the motorcycle was essentially a suggestion. Then Moto Guzzi walked away from Grand Prix racing altogether after 1957. The engine was never beaten on merit. The program was cancelled around it. 8 cylinders, beaten by a spreadsheet. The Widowmaker, 750cc, 2-stroke, 3 cylinders. 1972, and Kawasaki has built something the riders themselves named after what it did to them. The Kawasaki H2 Mach 4. And the engine wasn't dangerous because it was powerful. It was dangerous because of when it was powerful. A 2-strokes exhaust isn't a pipe. It's a tuned instrument. The expansion chamber sends a pressure wave back at the cylinder to shove the escaping charge in again, but only inside a narrow band of revs. Below about 5,000 RPM, the H2 is polite, almost boring. Cross 5,000 and the pipes come on song and the whole engine arrives at once. So you get a power step, not a power curve. Bolted into a short, flexi frame with forks and brakes from an era that had no idea this was coming. Roll on mid-corner and the back steps out. Grab the brakes and the forks give up. Kawasaki redesigned the frame and the steering geometry for 74 and smoothed the torque curve out. You can't recall a reputation. The helicopter, 320 claimed horsepower, 52,000 RPM. 425 pound-feet of torque at 2,000 RPM. That is a Rolls-Royce Allison 250. It is a helicopter engine. Marine Turbine Technologies put one in a motorcycle and sold it to the public as the Y2K. And it isn't a jet bike. Nothing here is propelled by thrust. It's a turbo shaft. The turbine spins a shaft. The shaft goes through a 2-speed gearbox, and a chain drives the back wheel, same as any other motorcycle. Wild engine. Completely conventional drivetrain, but a turbine and a road want different things from each other. Open the throttle and nothing happens, and then everything happens. It has to spool up before it delivers. So you're riding a second ahead of the bike. Close the throttle and nothing slows down, because a free turbine gives you no engine braking at all. And it idles fast enough to still be making real power while you're stopped, so the thing is permanently trying to leave. Then there's the exhaust. Hot enough to be a genuine problem for whatever is behind you at the lights, and a range somewhere around 100 miles. So who exactly was this for? It's just a helicopter engine with a number plate. The Square. 4 cylinders. 2 crankshafts spinning in opposite directions. All of it squeezed into the space of a twin, and they sold it for 28 years. The Ariel Square 4, drawn by Edward Turner, and the idea is genuinely clever. Stop arranging 4 cylinders in a line and stack them in a square instead. 2 counter-rotating cranks geared together, 1 camshaft in the middle working 8 overhead valves, 4-cylinder smoothness in roughly the space of a twin. And then they rode it. Because what does the back of that engine actually breathe? Air hits the front 2 cylinders first. The back 2 sit in a pocket of still air, shrouded with no clean airflow of their own, and they're also soaking up the heat radiating off the 2 hot cylinders directly in front of them. Front pair fine. Back pair cooking. And we know that diagnosis is right because of how they fixed it. Turner left. Val Page took over in '37 and cut a tunnel between the 2 front cylinders, a duct straight through the engine for no purpose except shoving cold air at the back of it. They had to build a corridor for the wind. The Twingle. 250cc, 16 years in production, and it has 2 pistons sharing 1 combustion chamber. This is the Puch 250 SGs built from '53 and sold in America by Sears under the Allstate name, which is where that ridiculous nickname comes from. The bores sit side by side and join at the top into a single shared chamber. One connecting rod does the work, with a second rod forked off it and hinged on its back. The front piston controls the intake and the exhaust ports, which is why the carburetor ends up at the front of the engine, tucked under the exhaust, looking like somebody assembled it wrong. And it is solving a real problem. An ordinary two-stroke throws a chunk of its fresh fuel straight out of the exhaust port, unburnt. The split single sends the new mixture up one bore and sweeps the old gases down the other. So far less of your petrol escapes without doing any work. Better economy. Cleaner running at small throttle openings. Then tuned expansion chambers arrived and solved the same scavenging problem with a shaped pipe. A bent tube did it for free. The Pacer? Sylvester Roper died on this machine. Whether it killed him is still an open question, and that distinction is the whole entry. Roper had been building steam machines since the 1860s, a coal fire and a boiler on two wheels. By 1896, he had a later machine he believed in, and he took it to the Charles River bicycle track in Boston to test it as a pacer, the machine that runs ahead of racing cyclists. He was 73 years old. He ran the mile in 2 minutes and 1 2/5 seconds, about 40 miles an hour. The Boston Globe recorded the time and recorded that the trained racing men could not keep up with him. Then, on the backstretch, the front wheel began to wobble, and onlookers ran out to catch him. He'd had a massive heart attack. And here's the honest part. Nobody knows the order. Whether his heart failed and he fell, or whether the fall stressed a 73-year-old heart. The doctors could only certify heart failure. 130 years later, that is still where it sits. He had just outrun every professional on that track. The Triangle. 62 horsepower out of half a liter, and it needed 2 entirely separate cooling systems to survive making it. Water for the engine cases. Oil for the combustion chamber. 2 radiators. 1975, and Suzuki has decided the future is the Wankel. The RE5, a single-rotor rotary, 497cc. A Wankel has nothing going up and down. A rounded triangular rotor orbits inside a pinched oval housing, and the 3 chambers it forms are each doing something different at the same time. One drawing in, one burning, one exhausting. Beautifully smooth. And a nightmare to keep cool because the burning always happens in the same region of the housing. One region of that engine is cooked continuously, while the rest of it runs far cooler. Hence the double cooling, the dual-lined exhaust with its own cold air intake ducts, and a carburetor running 5 separate fuel and air circuits. 5 circuits. In a carburetor. Who was ever going to service that? Nobody, as it turned out. It launched into an oil crisis, returning 25 to 30 miles per gallon and drinking oil on top. No ordinary dealer knew how to work on a Wankel, and the warranty claims stacked up against almost no sales. Dead in 2 years, thousands unsold. They bet the company on a Triangle. The Oval. 4 cylinders. 32 valves. 8 per cylinder. Because a rule capping Grand Prix bikes at 4 cylinders never said what shape a cylinder had to be. 1979. The NR500. The pistons are oval, effectively 2 round pistons melted into one. 4 cylinders on paper. 8 cylinders worth of valve area in reality. Now, watch it come apart. Oval piston rings had to be machined to tolerances at the limit of the era. Then there's the piston itself. An oblong piston rocks as it reverses direction every stroke, thousands of times a minute. Honda's answer, 2 connecting rods per piston, 1 at each end, to hold it straight. 2 rods means the wrist pin has to span the gap between them. So the pin gets long. And a long pin, loaded hard at high RPM, flexes. Past 10,000 RPM, the rods distorted, dragged the pin out of true, and the engine tore itself apart. It debuted at Silverstone. Grant went down on the first corner, on oil his own bike had put on his rear tire. Katayama lasted 7 laps. At the French Grand Prix, it didn't qualify at all. Every fix built the next failure. The wheel. The engine isn't connected to the front wheel. The engine is the front wheel. Germany, 1921. The Megola. 5 cylinders, side valve, 640cc, arranged in a circle and mounted inside the front rim. This is a true rotary, and it's the opposite of what you're picturing. The crankshaft is bolted to the front fork and never turns at all. The cylinders and the whole crankcase spin around it instead, and take the wheel with them. There's a 6-to-1 reduction built into the assembly, so the engine turns 6 times for every single rotation of the wheel. No chain, no gearbox, no clutch, nothing between the combustion and the road, which is what made it so hard to sell. With 1 ratio and no clutch, it cannot sit still and idle. You stop, it stops. To start it again, you push the bike, or you put it on the stand and kick the spokes of the front wheel with your heel until it catches. Who buys that twice? About 2,000 people bought one. Then German hyperinflation took the market for expensive motorcycles, and by 1925 the Megola was finished. And it genuinely worked. The sporting version ran to 88 miles an hour, on a wheel that was also the engine. Then imagine a puncture. Subscribe. If you want more machines that should never have left the drawing board, the marine engines are somehow worse. Send it to the scrapyard.